Imagine the sun is dying. Not forever, but every single day it sinks lower, the light gets thinner, and the air begins to bite. You feel it in your bones before you understand it. Winter is coming, but you don't have a heated house. You don't have a grocery store, a thick coat hanging by the door, or a switch on the wall that makes the cold go away. You have a fire that could die in the night, a handful of people you love, and a few months of darkness ahead that will try, with everything it has, to kill you. Because here's a truth we've almost completely forgotten. For most of human history, winter wasn't a season, it was a predator, and it killed more of our ancestors than lions, wolves, and starvation combined. So here's the question that should send a chill down your spine. How did ancient humans survive winters brutal enough to wipe out entire groups? And what desperate, disturbing things were they willing to do when the cold closed in? Because the real answer isn't cozy. It's a story of fire guarded like a newborn, of unthinkable meals, and of choices so dark that we still struggle to talk about them today. Let's start with the one thing that stood between a human and death: fire. To us, fire is a convenience. To an ancient human in winter, fire was life itself, and losing it could mean losing everyone. A fire had to be fed constantly, sheltered from wind and snow, and never, ever allowed to go fully out, because relighting one in freezing, wet conditions with numb fingers could be nearly impossible. So people carried embers with them, nestled in bundles of bark, moss, or dung, keeping a tiny piece of yesterday's fire alive so they'd never face the dark completely cold. Some groups almost certainly had a person whose entire role was to keep the flame breathing through the night. Think about that. While you slept, someone stayed awake in the freezing black, feeding the one glowing thing keeping the whole group from freezing to death. But fire alone couldn't save you if the cold could reach your skin. And this is where humans did something no other animal on Earth managed. They built their own fur. Naked apes had no business surviving an ice age, yet they pushed into some of the coldest lands on the planet, and the secret weapon was a tiny, unglamorous invention: the needle. With needles carved from bone, ancient humans stitched animal hides into fitted, layered clothing. Not just draped skins, but actual tailored garments with sleeves and seams that trapped warm air against the body. They lined boots and hoods with fur turned inward. They learned that layering hides created pockets of warmth, the same principle as your winter jacket today. That single skill, sewing, may be one of the biggest reasons our species spread across the frozen north, while other human species vanished. A sharpened splinter of bone quietly conquered the cold. Then there was shelter, and ancient humans became astonishingly clever architects of warmth. In lands with no wood, on the freezing open steppe, they built homes out of the only giant building material available: the bones of mammoths. Archaeologists have found huts framed from hundreds of massive mammoth bones and tusks, covered in hides and packed with earth, dome-shaped fortresses against the wind. Others dug their homes partway into the ground because the earth itself holds warmth, turning a simple pit lined with hides and roofed over into something far warmer than the killing air above. And when snow came, they used it, banking it against walls as insulation. The same reason an igloo, built entirely from frozen water, can stay shockingly warm inside while a blizzard screams outside. They didn't fight the winter's materials. They turned snow, earth, and bone into armor. Of course, none of it mattered if you starved, and winter is a season when almost nothing grows and animals grow thin or disappear. So survival began long before the first snowfall. In autumn, ancient humans gorged. They ate everything they could and fattened their bodies deliberately, because a layer of fat is both a food store and a blanket you carry inside your own skin. They obsessed over fat itself, prizing the fatty parts of animals far above lean meat, because in the cold, fat is pure survival fuel. When a carcass was picked clean, they cracked the bones open for the marrow, and even boiled crushed bones to skim off the grease. Nothing was wasted. They cached food too, burying meat in the naturally freezing ground, letting the permafrost act as a freezer thousands of years before anyone dreamed of a refrigerator. A frozen carcass hidden in the earth in October could be the difference between life and death in February. And at night, they did the simplest, oldest thing of all. They huddled. Body heat is precious, and ancient humans shared it without shame, packing together under piles of furs, sometimes sleeping close to their animals, letting the warmth of many bodies keep each one alive. A group that slept apart in deep winter was a group that might not all wake up, But now we come to the part that gives this story its darkness, because sometimes the fire held, the furs held, the shelter held, and it still wasn't enough. The food ran out, the herds didn't come, the snow buried everything, and when starvation set in, ancient humans faced choices that no comfortable modern mind wants to imagine. First, they ate the unthinkable. They gnawed bark and boiled it soft. They chewed on leather, the very hides meant to keep them warm. They ate the contents of animal stomachs and drank blood and swallowed things that offered barely any nourishment at all, just to keep the machine of the body running one more day. Hunger in deep winter erased every idea of what food was supposed to be. And when even that failed, the archaeological record tells us something haunting. Sometimes they ate each other. At sites across the ancient world, scientists have found human bones bearing the same cut marks, the same cracking for marrow as the animal bones beside them. Evidence that in the most desperate winters, survival cannibalism was real. It wasn't cruelty, it was the final, horrifying arithmetic of starvation. A group doing the unspeakable so that someone, anyone, might live to see spring. We flinch from it. But it happened, again and again, wherever the cold pushed humans past the edge of survival. There is another dark shadow in this story, one that's harder to prove but echoes through the history and folklore of cold peoples, the abandoning of those who couldn't keep up. In the most brutal winters, a group on the move had to make brutal math. The very old, the very sick, the ones who could no longer travel or contribute. In the harshest tellings, they were sometimes left behind in the snow, so the rest might survive. It's a choice so cold it feels inhuman, and yet it was born from love as much as desperation. A dying elder choosing not to doom their children by slowing them down. Winter didn't just test human bodies, it tested the limits of what people would do for each other, and to each other. And then there's the strangest theory of all, one that sounds like science fiction. Some scientists, studying the bones of ancient humans who lived through savage Ice Age winters, have noticed odd patterns of interrupted growth, the kind you see in animals that hibernate. It's led to a genuinely debated idea that some ancient humans may have survived the darkest months by slowing their bodies down into a kind of deep, sluggish, semi-hibernation, huddled in caves, barely moving, barely eating, waiting the winter out in a fog of near sleep. The theory is still argued over and far from proven, but just imagine it. Entire families curled in the dark, breathing slow, their hearts almost idling, letting winter pass over them like a long, cold dream. So step back and look at what it actually took to survive. A fire someone stayed awake all night to feed. Clothing sewn together stitch by stitch from the skins of hunted beasts. Homes built from mammoth bones and buried in the warm earth. Bodies deliberately fattened. Bones cracked for their last drop of grease. Meat frozen in the ground for the hungry months. Nights spent packed together for warmth. And when all of that failed, meals no one wants to imagine, and choices no one wants to make. Every winter was a war, and our ancestors won it not with strength, but with fire, cleverness, sacrifice, and a will to live that refused to freeze. Here's the part that should stay with you. You will complain about winter this year. You'll grumble about scraping your car, about a cold house, about a heating bill, and that's fine. But somewhere underneath the comfort, remember what it cost to get here. The coat you zip up is the descendant of a bone needle and a scraped hide. The warm home you close the door on is the descendant of a mammoth bone hut banked with snow. The full fridge you take for granted is the descendant of a frozen carcass buried in desperation. We are the children of the ones who stared winter in the face, who did the clever things and the brave things, and yes, the dark and terrible things, so that their group might live to feel the sun climb back into the sky. Winter used to be the thing most likely to kill you. Our ancestors didn't just endure it, they outthought it, outfought it, and sometimes paid a price for it that we can barely stand to look at. So maybe the real question isn't how ancient humans survived winters that should have killed them. Maybe it's whether we, warm and soft and comfortable, could ever survive what they did.